Chevrolet built the Camaro for one reason: to hunt down and eat the Ford Mustang. Across 6 generations, this car went from the most feared machine in Detroit to something Chevy quietly killed off with its own hands. And how it got there starts with an engine the company had to smuggle past its own accountants. I dug through hundreds of factory records, production tallies, and drag strip time slips to put this together. The stakes: 57 years of bloodline, and one version so rare it now sells for over $1 million. You probably think the meanest Camaro is the modern 650 horsepower one. It isn't. The one that actually terrified the competition was built in 1969, and it lied about how much power it made. Chevy showed up late. The Mustang had a 2-year head start and a runaway lead, so Chevrolet couldn't just build a rival. It had to build a predator. When the press asked what a Camaro even was, a Chevy exec said it was a small, vicious animal that eats Mustangs. It came 3 ways that mattered. The RS dressed it up with hidden headlights, the SS packed a 350 or a big block 396, and in 1967 an SS convertible paced the Indianapolis 500. But a nickname doesn't win races, so in December of 1966, engineer Vince Piggin slipped a package onto the order sheet that Chevrolet never advertised: the Z28. Under the hood sat a high-revving 302 rated at 290 horsepower, a number the factory almost certainly lowballed to duck the insurance companies. In 1967, only 602 people managed to get their hands on one. And out on track, Roger Penske and Mark Donohue drove the Z28 to back-to-back Trans Am titles in 1968 and 1969. The Eat Mustangs line stopped being a joke. There was just one wall in the way. GM banned any engine bigger than 400 cubic inches in a car this size, so the Camaro was capped at a 396 while Ford was stuffing a 429 into the Mustang. So Chevrolet cheated, legally. There was a backdoor called COPO, a fleet order system meant for taxis and squad cars. An Illinois dealer named Fred Gibb used it to order something completely insane. He had Chevy drop in the ZL1, an all-aluminum 427, born in Can-Am racing, the first aluminum block engine Chevy ever sold to the public. On paper, 430 horsepower. In reality, everyone agrees it made well over 500. It was so light, the car ran the quarter mile in the mid-11s, 11.64 seconds at 122 miles per hour with the right driver behind the wheel. But it cost more than a fully loaded Corvette. The first 2 to land on Gibbs' lot wouldn't even start in the Illinois cold. Nobody wanted to pay up, so Gibbs shipped 37 of them back to Chevrolet. Only 69 ZL1 Camaros were ever built. Today, one sells for over $1.4 million. Chevrolet had built the ultimate Mustang hunter. But a storm was rolling in that no back door could dodge. Gas lines, insurance crackdowns, and emissions laws that would choke the life out of every muscle car in America. And the Camaro was walking right into it. In the spring of 1970, an all-new Camaro showed up, longer, lower, wider, with a shape that borrowed from Ferrari and Jaguar. The convertible was gone. Engineers called it a driver's car, and nicknamed it the Super Hugger. The prettiest of them all was the split-bumper RS, a face that still turns heads today. And it finally had the engine to match. The new Z28 ran the LT1, a 350 shared with the Corvette, 360 gross horsepower, 11-to-1 compression, solid lifters. It ran the quarter mile in the mid-14s and hit 130 miles per hour. For the first time, you could get a Z28 with an automatic. The SS was still around with its 396, which, from 1970 on, actually measured 402 cubic inches, but Chevy kept the 396 name to avoid waking up the insurance companies. But the storm was already overhead. In 1970, Congress passed the Clean Air Act and demanded a 90% cut in emissions by 1975. So in came unleaded gas, down went compression, and down went the horsepower with it. In 1971, the LT1 dropped from 360 to 330. In 1972, they changed how power was measured, from gross to net, and on paper, the same engine cratered to 255. That year, a 174-day strike shut down production, and inside General Motors there were execs who wanted to kill the Camaro for good. Only 68,656 got built. It survived by the skin of its teeth. But the bleeding didn't stop. In 1973, the SS and the big block were gone. In 1975 came the catalytic converter, and Chevy axed the Z28 altogether. That year's strongest engine, a 350, made just 155 horsepower, less than half of the 1970 LT1. The Mustang Hunter had turned into a house cat. Here's where the story flips, because while the Camaro was fading, its rivals were flat out dying. Plymouth killed the Barracuda, Dodge killed the Challenger, AMC killed the Javelin. The Camaro, on the other hand, hung on and waited for its shot. And it came. In 1977, pushed by the success of the Firebird Trans Am, head engineer Tom Zimmer demanded the Z28 come back. It debuted at Daytona and was an instant hit. That same year, something happened that Chevy had been chasing for 11 years. The Camaro outsold the Ford Mustang for the very first time. The Eat Mustang's promise finally came true, not on horsepower, but on sheer stubbornness. The best was saved for last. 1979 was the single best-selling year in Camaro history. 282,582 cars. The car they tried to kill ended up being the most popular it had ever been, but a Camaro that won on tape stripes and good posture couldn't last forever. The next generation was about to throw out almost everything that made a Camaro, and bet the whole thing on a technology Detroit barely understood yet. In 1982, Chevrolet threw out almost everything that made a Camaro. The new one was angular, aerodynamic, half a foot shorter, and hundreds of pounds lighter. It introduced things the badge had never worn before: fuel injection, a 4-speed automatic, a hatchback, and a 4-cylinder engine. Yeah, a 4-cylinder Camaro. The base engine was Pontiac's Iron Duke, making a grand total of 90 horsepower. And at the very top, the Z28 didn't get a big block. It got a 305 with crossfire injection and 165 horsepower, and it needed nearly 10 seconds to reach 60. The Mustang Hunter had turned into a car that barely nibbled, but there was a method to it. Detroit couldn't corner, and the rest of the world could. So this time Chevrolet didn't bet on the straight line. It bet on the curves, rack and pinion steering, almost unheard of on an American pony car. The Camaro was learning a brand new language, and in 1985, it all clicked. Enter the iROC-Z, named after the International Race of Champions series. For $658 over a Z28, you got Delco Bilstein shocks, a chassis brace they nicknamed the Wonder Bar, Corvette Gatorback tires, and tuned port injection. It made 215 horsepower and hit 60 in about 7 seconds. That year, it landed on Car and Driver's 10 Best list. The house cat had its claws back. In 1987, something happened that hadn't in a decade. The 350 came back to the Camaro. With 245 horsepower, it finally outmuscled the Mustang 5.0 again. The war was back on. And here's the secret weapon. In 1988, an order code showed up that almost nobody knew about, the 1LE. It wasn't in any catalog or any ad. It only triggered if you ordered the performance axle and skipped the air conditioning. It came with huge brakes, aluminum calipers, an aluminum drive shaft, and a baffled fuel tank, built to win in showroom stock road racing. You needed the secret handshake to get one. That first year they built just 4, but the clock was ticking. In 1990, Dodge took over the iROC series, so the name disappeared. And in 1992, the Van Nuys plant in California shut its doors. The last third-gen Camaro was a red Z28 coupe that rolled off the line on August 27, 1992, covered in the signatures of the workers who built it. It was the last Camaro built in the United States, and it would not be built on American soil again until 2015. Production headed north to Canada, but it took something with it that fans had been waiting 20 years for: the most brutal engines in Camaro history lifted straight out of the Corvette. The horsepower war was about to blow wide open again. In January of 1993, the fourth generation arrived, now built in Canada, at the Sainte-Thérèse plant in Quebec. It had composite body panels on the roof, doors, and hatch, and a low, sharp silhouette like a dart. But what really mattered was under the hood. The engines they had been promised had finally landed. The Z28 came standard with the LT1. The Corvette 350 engine with 275 horsepower and 325 pound-feet of torque. It ran from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 6.3 seconds and topped out at 150 miles per hour. The horsepower war that died in the 1970s had just reignited. That year, a Z28 paced the Indianapolis 500, and the winner, Emerson Fittipaldi, took one home as part of the prize. And it only got better. In 1996, the SS came back, built by a shop called SLP, with 305 horsepower and a functional ram air hood. In 1997, for the 30th anniversary, Chevy dressed the Camaro in white with orange stripes, a straight nod to the 1969 pace car, and offered the LT4 engine with 330 horsepower, the fastest and priciest factory Camaro yet, at over $38,000. Only 108 were built. But the best punch came in 1998. Chevy dropped in the LS1, the new all-aluminum V8 from the Corvette C5. And here is the detail that closes the loop. It was the first aluminum block engine in a Camaro since the legendary ZL1 of 1969. It was rated at 305 horsepower, though in Camaro circles it is taken as gospel that it made quite a bit more. The only thing separating it from the Corvette was software. The SS climbed to 320. And here is the cruel part of this story. The Camaro was now faster than it had ever been, and it was dying. The sports coupe market was collapsing, people wanted SUVs, and sales fell year after year just as the stopwatch times dropped. In 2001, only 29,009 were built, the worst year in its history. The LS1 was both the best new beginning and the beginning of the end. In 2002, Chevy built a 35th anniversary edition to say goodbye, red with silver stripes ending in checkered flags. And then came the end. On August 27, 2002, the last 4th-gen Camaro, a red Z28, rolled off the line. Oddly enough, the last 3rd-gen had rolled off on that exact same date, August 27th, 10 years earlier. The next day, the Sainte-Thérèse plant closed for good. The Mustang Hunter was dead. For the first time since 1966, you could not buy a new Camaro. The Firebird died alongside it, and it would never come back. But an icon doesn't stay down that easy. 8 years later, the Camaro would come back to life in the most unexpected way. Not thanks to an engineer, but thanks to a movie about giant robots that would turn it into Hollywood's most famous star. The Camaro had been dead for 8 years, and what brought it back wasn't an engineer, it was a movie director. When Michael Bay was walking through Chevrolet's design studios, he stumbled onto a Camaro concept, stopped, and said, "I'm going to make that a star of a movie." That movie was Transformers, the highest-grossing film of 2007. The concept became Bumblebee, the yellow Autobot, and just like that, millions of people fell in love with a car they couldn't even buy yet. The films pulled in $1.5 billion and reintroduced the Camaro after a 7-year absence. In 2009, before it even hit dealers, it was the most searched for car on the internet. When it finally went on sale as a 2010 model, its design was a shameless love letter to 1969. The deep egg crate grille, the round headlamps, the bulging hood. Underneath, it debuted the first multi-link rear suspension in Camaro history. And it worked. In 2010, the Camaro took the U.S. sports car sales crown away from the Mustang for the first time in 24 years. The next year, it sold 40,275 cars to the Mustang's 30,206. A luxury special edition, the Neiman Marcus, sold out in 3 minutes flat. There were only 75. But the Camaro did not come back just to pose on the big screen. The SS packed a 6.2-liter V8 with 426 horsepower, and in 2012 Chevy brought back a sacred name from 1969, the ZL1. This time with a supercharged 6.2 making 580 horsepower, the most powerful street Camaro ever built up to that point. It was such a monster it forced Ford to crank up its Mustang GT 500 just to keep pace. The war was red hot again, and it still had its best card to play. In 2014, the other legendary name from 1969 came back, the Z28, but this one was not chasing horsepower, it was chasing lap times. It ran the 7.0-liter LS7, 505 horsepower pulled straight from the Corvette Z06. Chevy stripped it bare, no sound deadening, thinner glass, a lighter battery, and no air conditioning. They charged you extra if you wanted it. It debuted carbon ceramic brakes and dry sump oiling. Another Camaro first. This was not a pretty car to show off. It was a track weapon. In the end, the fifth generation sold over 500,000 cars, and this is the stat that says it all, it outsold the Mustang every single year of its life. The car Chevy had buried in 2002 had not just come back from the dead. It had won. And with that momentum, the Camaro was finally getting ready to come home. The next generation would be built on American soil again, in Michigan, on a completely new platform. It was going to be the best Camaro Chevrolet ever made, and it would also be the last. After more than 2 decades, the Camaro finally came home. The sixth generation was built in Lansing, Michigan, on American soil for the first time since 1992, and it didn't come back to play it safe. It was built on the Alpha platform, the same bones as Cadillac's sports sedans, and it weighed up to 390 pounds less than the generation before it. Engineers summed it up in one perfect line: a Corvette with a back seat. Motor Trend named it Car of the Year for 2016. The SS ran the 6.2-liter LT1 V8 with 455 horsepower and hit 60 miles per hour in a flat 4 seconds. Funny enough, the base engine was a 4-cylinder again, but this time turbocharged, with 275 horsepower. More power than the legendary 1969 Z28. The Camaro had come full circle, and in 2017, the most feared name of them all came back, the ZL1. Nearly half a century after those 69 aluminum cars, the new ZL1 packed a supercharged 6.2-liter engine making 650 horsepower. And here is the detail that closes the whole story. Those were 650 honest horses. No Copo back door, no lying about the number. It hit 60 miles per hour in 3.5 seconds, but they raised the bar even higher. The ZL1 1LE was the fastest, most powerful, best handling Camaro ever built. With multimatic dampers, carbon fiber aero making 300 pounds of downforce, and springs 3 times stiffer, it lapped the Nürburgring's green hell in 7 minutes. 16 seconds, nearly 14 seconds quicker than the standard ZL1. It was, hands down, the best Camaro ever made. And that's exactly why what happened next stings so much, because the world had shifted again. People didn't want coupes anymore, they wanted SUVs and electric cars. So in March of 2023, GM announced it was killing the Camaro. Again. On December 14th of that year, the last Camaro rolled off the Lansing line. A white ZL1, 6-speed manual, with the most extreme track package they offered. It was the second time Chevrolet had buried its Mustang Hunter with no successor in sight. To send it off, Chevy built a collector's edition, and it finally gave the car back the name it had been born under, in secret, 6 decades earlier, before it was even called Camaro. Panther. The small, vicious animal closed its eyes wearing its very first name. Here is the cruelest irony in this whole story. The Camaro was born with one obsession: to hunt down and devour the Ford Mustang. 6 generations, 2 deaths, banned engines, records, and Hollywood resurrections, all over that rivalry. But while Chevy and Ford spent nearly 60 years tearing at each other, there was a third player in Detroit running a completely different game. Dodge wasn't chasing anybody. It built raw, unapologetic muscle. The Charger, the Challenger, Hemi engines with numbers that bordered on absurd. And when the Camaro went down for the second time, those cars were still standing, still lighting up their tires. So there is one question this video can't answer. What if the real king of the American muscle car was never the Camaro or the Mustang, but the one that never needed to hunt anybody at all? The complete story of Dodge, from the first Charger to the last Challenger, is waiting for you right here.